More than 30 nuclear experts inhale uranium after radiation alarms at a weapons site are switched off. Most were not told about it until months later, and other mishaps at the Nevada nuclear test site followed. The government scientists didn't know that they were breathing in radioactive uranium at the time it was happening. In fact, most didn't learn about their exposure for months, long after they returned home from the Nuclear Weapons Research Center where they inhaled it. The entire event was characterized by sloppiness, according to a quiet federal investigation, with multiple warnings issued and ignored in advance, and new episodes of contamination allowed to occur afterward. All of this transpired without public notice by the Public Senate. In May of 2014, an elite group of 97 nuclear researchers from as far away as the UK gathered in a remote corner of Nye County, Nevada, at the historic site where the US had exploded hundreds of its nuclear weapons. With nuclear bomb testing ended, the scientists were using a device they called Godiva at the National Criticality Experiments Research Center to test nuclear pulses on a smaller and supposedly safe scale. But as the technicians prepared for their experiments that spring, under significant pressure to clear a major backlog of work and to operate the machine at what they report called Godiva's upper energy range. But as the technicians prepared for their experiments that spring, under significant pressure to clear a major backlog of work and to operate the machine at what a report called Godiva's upper energy range, they committed several grievous errors according to government reports. The machine has been moved to Nevada's 9 years earlier from Los Alamos, New Mexico, but a shroud, descriptively called Top Hat, which should have covered the machine and prevented the escape of any loose radioactive particles, was not reinstalled when it was reassembled in 2012. Also because Godiva's burst tended to set off multiple radiation alarms in the center, the experimenters decided to switch the alarm system off. But because the alarms were connected to the ventilation and air filter systems for the room, they were shut off as well. The only ventilation remaining was a small exhaust fan that vented to an adjacent anteroom where researchers gathered before and after experiments. On June 16, 2014, months after the experiments were completed, technicians doing routine tests made an alarming discovery. Radioactive particles were in their room. Then they checked the room holding Godiva and found radiation 20 times more intense there. The Nevada site managers, who work for a group of private profit-making contractors like most U.S. nuclear weapons personnel, ordered the rooms decontaminated. But they didn't immediately check exposures among the scientists and researchers who had gathered for the tests, many of whom had already gone back to their own labs. None had any clue about the mishap until 2 months after the experiments. On July 17, when one of them, a researcher from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory Nuclear Weapons Lab in California, got the results from his routine radiation monitoring. His urine tested positive for exposure to enriched uranium particles. National Security Technology, the lead contractor that runs the Nevada site, subsequently collected urine specimens from its own workers who had been in the room with Godiva during the experiments. It discovered 3 of its technicians also had inhaled highly enriched uranium. News quickly spread, but only among the scientists and their bosses, who were accustomed to a shroud of official secrecy covering their work. No public announcements was made. According to the initial U.S. Department of Energy's investigative report, dated April 28, 2015. Calls eventually went out to test the 97 people present for the Godiva's experiments, but for reasons that remain unclear, the testing went very slowly, and not until 2016 did the DOE state that there were 31 discovered to have inhaled enriched uranium. Administrator Frank Klotz suggested that the employees' radiation doses were not large at the high end, that they were roughly equivalent to 13 chest x-rays. But once inhaled, we know that these highly enriched uranium particles can keep emitting radiation for years, and so they pose an added cancer risk. Klotz later deemed the exposure safety significant and preventable. It could have been even worse, of course, given the absence of any timely warning. Lab operations riddled with errors. The 4 key national facilities involved in the underlying experimentation: Los Alamos National Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore, the Nevada Test Site, and the National Laboratory in Sandia, are among the U.S. premier scientific labs. They collectively employ more than 26,000 people engaged in cutting-edge and often dangerous work, governed by myriad nuclear safety regulations, with 2 major contract enforcement mechanisms meant to inflict financial pain when needed on the private corporations that operate them. Not only were the lab's procedures and responses riddled with errors, but even after attention was called to their accidents, other safety mishaps occurred, and the financial penalties imposed by the government didn't seem to have a major impact on the lab's conduct. The key findings. So a total of 31 scientists and technicians inhaled cancerous-causing uranium particles during laboratory experiments at the National Nevada Security Site, which supports the U.S. nuclear weapon program. Annoyed by radiation alarms during these experiments, those conducting the experiments switched off the electrical circuits also connected to a safety ventilation system. The particles then spewed throughout the room in an adjacent room where scientists congregated before and after the experiments. The lab investigated the problem slowly, and more than a year passed before some of the affected personnel found out that they had been internally contaminated. Due to the incident, the reactor that caused the personal contaminations was switched off from July 2014 to January 2016. Delaying work meant to help improve nuclear safety and verify the potency of weapons in the U.S. nuclear arsenal. They got those potent contaminations. A federal investigation after the exposures found safety deficiencies that had been previously flagged by oversight groups but went unfixed for years. But the private firms that operate the National Nevada Security Site received 90% or more of the profits available to them. A review by the Center of Public Integrity of more than 60 safety mishaps and 10 nuclear weapons-related federal sites were flagged in special internal reports to Washington, along with dozens of interviews with officials and experts, revealed a protective system that is weak, if not only truly dysfunctional. Fines are frequently reduced or waived while contractors are awarded large profits. Auditors say labs and production plants are overseen by an inadequate staff and NSA and DOE, which as a result largely rely on the contractors to police themselves. The CPI probe, partly based on documents obtained from the Freedom of Information Act, revealed a system in which extra profits is awarded under a rating profile that persistently placed higher priority on the nuclear weapons lab's national security mission than on workers' protections, putting production far ahead of safety. Experts say it is a practice in keeping with the culture of urgent, no-holds-barred work that took root in the nuclear weapons complex during World War II. These production pressures flow down to the highly secured rooms where workers labor with special clearances, routinely handling highly toxic explosive materials. DOE typically gives the private companies involved a financial bonus when they accomplish the mission on that deadline. One of the 16 workers exposed to radiation in an incident at the Idaho National Laboratory in 2011, year of the Fukushima. When the bonus milestone is in play, meaning on the occasions corporate lab operators gain extra pay by meeting production deadlines, some of the workers feel that safety is completely gone. Tracy Bauer, spokesperson for the contractors that operate the Nevada test site, said its performance scores are high and that our primary concern has been to continue to be the safety of our employees and our community. When the Nevada incident occurred, the Godiva experiments had considered urgency. After being moved to Nevada from Los Alamos, the machine was originally supposed to resume operations in 2010. There are 3 similar machines inside a tubular sheet building about the size of 2 football fields, with a striking white top barely visible above ground because it was swaddled in compacted earth. But in August of that year, the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board, an independent federal safety agency that monitors nuclear weapons operations, warned in a letter that it was concerned about deficiencies at the experimental facility housing Godiva, including potentially unreliable radiation alarms. Neither the NNSA nor the site's private contractors had conducted sufficiently detailed design reviews of the facility, the board's chair. Godiva operations was postponed, but the control bursts of radiation were finally restarted in September of 2013, the same month that the DOE's Office of Inspector General warned that some of the safety issues persisted with Godiva, including flaws in some instrumentation related to safety and incomplete documents meant to guide worker safety through their tasks. The Inspector General's report also warned that more than a third of the time, when the contractors involved said that they had fixed problems flagged by the government, they hadn't actually done so. The Inspectors General blamed the delays and problems in parts on weakness in federal oversight. A workplace hazardous to whistleblowers, but inadequate supervision from Washington was only part of the problem. According to a separate August of 2013 report, the leaders of the NS Tech were generally inattentive to worker safety concerns and resentful of NNSA's oversight, amid a rise in workplace injury and illness at the site, which the report did not explain. The contractor had depicted the government's inquiries about it as an overreaction. Stop it, it's just a little plutonium in your lungs, you're overreacting. Just a highly enriched uranium? The report said that because the contractor did not consistently encourage open communications, frontline workers feared retaliation if they complained to their supervisors about safety issues. Overall, the report said significant stresses existed on the site, safety and security culture, and there were indications of a chilling effect that worried workers. If you are a current or former employee of the National Nuclear Safety Administration, the Energy Department, or one of its contractors, and you know of events, incidents, actions, and decisions, conditions, or documents worthy of our attention, please contact. It was against this backdrop that the Godiva contaminations played out several months the following year. The device is an ugly stack of high-tech machinery, shelving and wires that stands as tall as a man. Inside are rings and blocks of highly enriched uranium, a key nuclear explosive. They are made to fission, just slightly, when they are delicately moved closer by at least 2 technicians. The point is to generate modest bursts of radiation useful for researching nuclear power, training nuclear safety experts, predicting weapons effects, and making bomb components less vulnerable to radiation storms in a nuclear war. Those who gathered for the experiments came from Los Alamos, which oversaw the work, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, and the UK's Atomic Weapons Establishment. In a push to make up for lost time, experimentation on Godiva was placed on an accelerated schedule. as of September of 2016. Reports detail the NNSA's review of the contaminations noted. During April-May of 2014, there was an increased campaign of Godiva's burst operations, some of which were in the upper energy range of Godiva's capability. All the while, with the radiation alarm silenced, the particles of uranium were being piped into the main Godiva room, an area where the experiments thought they would be safe. Although the contamination started showing up in June, it was not until August 7, 2014 that the DOE's Nevada field office at the site shut down Godiva's operations. Another 11 days had passed before technicians noted even higher contamination levels inside the room that housed the machines. The contractors involved from Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and the Nevada test site didn't determine that the incident merited a formal safety report to Washington for another 2 weeks. A spokesperson for the NNSA, Greg Wolf in sheep's clothing, wrote in an email that all the exposure levels were below regulatory limits and posed minimal health risks. Yeah, Greg, why don't you have a few of those uranium atoms in your lungs too? He wrote Godiva's operations are now being closely monitored, and that the contractors that run Nevada and Los Alamos take any unexpected exposure seriously. He wrote Godiva's operations are now being closely monitored, and that the contractors that run Nevada and Los Alamos take any unexpected exposure seriously. DOE views seriously any events in which workers receive unplanned radiological uptake. From the DOE to Mark Peters, president of Battelle Energy Alliance and lab director at the Idaho National Laboratory, addressing a release of Americum-241 that resulted in 9 workers receiving intakes. Still, with those type of exposures, there is some incremental risk that you might get cancer. A certified health physicist, Joel Lubinua, industry consultant and former senior advisor to a chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He said the degree of risk depends on how large the particles were and whether they were soluble enough to enter the bloodstream and reach key organs. He also said he was highly surprised to hear the alarms had been turned off and that the protective shroud was never installed. No fines for repeated safety infractions. The fallout from the episode went on for years. In October 21st, 2014, 4 months after the original Godiva leakage, technicians detected excessive radioactive particle contamination outside the flat top's critical assembly device, another open-face radiation burst machine similar to Godiva, located in an adjacent building. Contamination also showed up again in the Godiva's equipment room. A week later, workers shut down flat top, but oddly no formal casual analysis was performed, according to a 2016 settlement order summarizing DOE's investigative findings on the Godiva incident. It was assumed that it was all related to Godiva, and the order disclosed. The settlement order called the Godiva's room monitoring system inadequate, the hazard controls insufficiently designed and implemented, and the management response slow and less than adequate. But because the NNSA had docked contractor profits, $87,000 for NS Tech and $500,000 for Los Alamos due to overall operational shortcomings, it levied no fines specific to the safety infractions. And following a common pattern, these amounted to only a portion of the documented mishaps at both labs during these periods. In September 2013, for example, security personnel at the Nevada site unexpectedly found a trailer full of Los Alamos radioactive waste sitting in a parking lot outside Gate 100 of the Nevada site. The trailer had been sent there for disposal, but the site had refused to accept it because it lacked appropriate shipping papers describing the trailer's contents, so it was left in the parking lot. After an investigation at Los Alamos voluntarily suspended its shipment of waste to Nevada due to continuing problems with paperwork, Los Alamos wasn't cleared to restart its waste shipments to Nevada until September, a full year after the trailer was discovered. During that same period, Los Alamos was sending another more dangerous waste to the DOE's waste isolation pilot plant in WIP, Carlsbad, for underground storage. But in December 2013, one of the subcontractors had added organic instead of inorganic materials to one of the drums. So they say, the radioactive kitty litter, organic kitty litter, based on a mistyped transcript of the internal meeting where the waste packaging requirements were discussed. And in February 2014, Happy Valentine's, after being sent into the bowels of the WIP with the raw material inside, a drum exploded, sending radioactivity throughout the facility and shutting it down for nearly 3 years, and an estimated $1.5 billion cost to the government. It's far more than that. For that, in 2014, the Los Alamos contractors had its profits cut by $57 million. Less than 4% of the repair bill. In that episode, the Final Accident Investigation Board reported supervisors have fostered a culture where employees do not feel comfortable raising safety issues to management. Ernest Moynes, Secretary of Energy from May of 2013 to January 2017, said shortly before leaving that day that the drum exploded at WIP was by far the worst day of his tenure. Los Alamos had said in a subsequent interview with the CPI had inadequate quality control in how they were packaging the waste. There is no sugarcoating that. Now, if one of these drums explode, and the drums are right next to each other, don't you think it's very plausible if one drum explodes, the drums next to them can also explode as well? That's not too far-fetched to think that that happened. There was a clear pattern in which the nuclear weapons laboratories were annually ranked more poorly by its departments on their operations than on their other tasks, with Los Alamos in particular the lowest. He said he had no doubt that they had some management problems, even after the WIP's debacle. Moreover, Los Alamos' troubles with worker safety were not over. On May 3rd of 2015, when a worker sprayed cleaning fluid inside a cubicle with high voltage connection that he thought had been turned off, he caused what is known as an arc flash explosion that blew him out of the cubicle and burned over 30% of his body. It caused him enormous suffering, recalls Don Nichols, who was then the NNSA's Associate Administrator for Safety and Health. He made an understandable human error. The controls that should have protected him were not there. Yet the government still gave the contractors nearly $44 million in profit, or 71% of the total available to it. In 2016, however, it decided to force a new competition for the roughly $2 billion annual contract to manage the laboratory, a decision that Munnis attributed in an interview to the current contractor's operational failure. There has been a 6 accidents and lack of consequences, for example at the Sendia National Laboratory. August 26, 2011, same year as Fukushima, hydrogen and steam explosion destroys a lab during a lithium experiment. One worker is knocked to the ground, other narrowly missing getting hit by flying debris. DOE calls it a near miss for serious injury or fatality. There was a $412,000 fine proposed, but zero fine was levied, and the lab received a $27 million compensation. It was earned about 95% of the contract. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, February 12, 2013. Accidental spraying of sulfuric acid on 3 workers during manufacture of high explosives. 2 severely burned on the skin, and the 3rd inhaled sulfuric acid mist. $41 million was awarded. April-May of 2014. Godiva's low-power reactor spews radiation and 31 people inhaled uranium particles. Management is slow to detect problems and slow to test workers for the intakes. DOE labels it safety significant and preventable. 0 fine proposed, 0 fine is levied, and $26.4 million was rewarded for the contract. Los Alamos National Laboratory. Electricians were spraying cleaning fluid in a cubicle where high-power electrical connectors were not turned off. The power ignited. Producing a arc flash explosion, blew the workers out of the work spots.
You've got to let go and let it happen.
At the Nevada National Security Site, a worker picked up a 55-gallon drum that he thought was empty in an outdoor shed bay. The drum exploded, blowing him 8 feet through the air, sending shrapnel into his leg. An accident board said the incident was wholly preventable. 0 fine proposed, 0 fine levied. Profits earned that year, $26.4 million. Idaho National Laboratory, November 8th of 2011, the year of the Fukushima. Workers were checking and repacking plutonium plates. One plate was found to be wrapped in plastic. When the plastic was cut open, plutonium oxide dust spilled out, filling the air. 16 workers breathed in radioactivity. DOE reports cited a litany of errors on the part of the BEA. This followed another incident in August when 3 workers were exposed to radiation in another facility. A fine of $600,000 for both incidents was proposed, and a $412,000 fine was levied, and the profits earned by the contractor that year were $17.1 million. Impunity for the top managers. David Oversky, a nuclear physicist and consultant in San Diego, who had been hired by both the NSA and its contractors, said, however, that his views the award of profit based on performance is having impact. It's just not having the desired impact. Instead of driving consistently good behavior, he said, performance-based profits inspire contractors to find ways to meet minimum standards to collect their bonus. Oversky, who analyzed conditions at the NSA sites and led a congressionally chartered study of the NSA's management system in 2006, said in a telephone interview, there needs to be consequences when people don't do their management job. And the consequences needs to be getting fired. That simply doesn't happen. He pointed out that even though the NSA's withheld substantial profit from the contractors that operate the Los Alamos National Laboratory, as well as the waste isolation pilot plant, that the top leaders at Los Alamos were subcontractors made the mistake that caused the radiation exposure accident kept their jobs. In the commercial world, I guarantee you a lot of people would have lost their jobs, and not low-level people. An accident board determined that the explosion was wholly preventable and criticized the contractor team for not having a comprehensive company-wide chemical safety program, according to its base board report. Then on February 26, 2015, a worker was overexposed to vapors in decreasing operation. The chemical in question, 1-bromopropane, had been linked to neurological illness, cancer, and reproductive disorders. An enforcement letter from Steve Simonson, director of the DOE's Office of Enforcement, said the incident revealed recurring issues in chemical handling and control that there was evident during the drum explosion. The letter, however, was just a warning and no fines were imposed. Breathing in balls, bookie balls, cup Open up my lungs, here's a halt. Doctor says I'm done, I have no calls. Finding Nemo on chemo. The radioactive's got me Constantino.